George, I'm so honoured to have you here today to discuss everything to do with what's going on in the world, to love, to relationships, to consciousness. And so, actually, I've got this here. Look, this is so random.
How lovely. Well, Marina, you do have a big heart, a beautiful soul. Honestly, it's been so nice to get to know you in the last year. And, in particular, in the last few weeks, we've really had some deep conversations. And I think, in a way, we're all mirrors, Mike, we're all mirrors of the macrocosm. We're all going through huge shifts, and it's not easy because authenticity is really being made to sort of pour out of every pore of us, because that's part of the awakening process, is to really align oneself with our true nature and our soul contract.
I love that. And I love it because your frequency is very angelic and it's very pure. And you can see your creativity and your passion for humanity. And that's what I love about your soul and about what you're putting out there and how you're creating this healing frequency everywhere you go through being truly yourself. So can you describe to us what authenticity means to you?
Yeah, I do think, there have been studies on this, that actually when a human being is truly in his or her authentic field, the frequency and the, if you like, the complexity of the composure of those molecules and just the aura is impacted and manifested even more than, say, the frequency of love. To be truthful is you can't be truly loving without being authentic. The authenticity comes first, and then the love, in a way, is a product of that higher frequency. And so the new earth for me is about Tommy out there being authentic, Sally being authentic, and even if we don't resonate with their interests, well done them. As opposed to the old paradigm, no, Tommy and Sally need to do it this way, fix Saturn, as I say in my astrology, control matrix. Everyone has to conform, wear the same t-shirt, and basically, totally repress the heart. So true authenticity is almost the toroidal field of the heart chakra being activated, so it spreads throughout the auric, and so goes right up above the crown and beneath the base perinatum chakra. So authenticity is key. And I find also when I'm doing healing on people, is once people have that experience of letting it go, not being judged, then their body has an alchemical reaction for the benefit in a very good way.
I love that. Authenticity is the highest vibration, as you said, scientifically proven to be higher than love. And that's because when you stop playing these roles, and it's exactly how I start my book, like we're told to play these different roles. Be the dad, be the husband, be all these different archetypes. But then who are you underneath that all? What is your passions? What do you love to do? What's your creative points? And I think that's often repressed. And that's where a lot of sadness and grief comes from.
Yeah. There is a lot of grief in the collective field at the moment. There also should be quite a lot of anger. We need both those things in order to grow out of it. Perhaps sometimes we start in grief, and out of that grief, then the Mars energy, you see, to bring it to the archetypes, grief, in a way, is related to the Neptune, because it's wanting almost to disappear, to leave, because the planet holds such a negative frequency, which has really been truthful. We have to speak the truth, that the realm of this planet has largely been run by Satan, not by God. And human beings have got to get to know that is truthful. If they don't get that yet, they're still in the matrix program, they're still in the mind control, because they're kind of accepting the situation, as opposed to what is radically free. Radical freedom is authenticity and us having full 100% choice in our actions, being conscious. And so the Neptune is the grief. We have to then move through that to positive Neptune, which is connection to source, creator, to God. And then with Mars, instead of it going just to anger and destruction, we have to use that martial quality to create. We have to use that martial quality to, instead of to be the fighter, to be the pioneer, to say, no, I'm going to stand up for wife and family, or whatever it is, stand up for the community, stand up for truth, and fight for it in a way that is integral, that is based on an inner knowing as well as an external manifestation of that. It can't be just knee-jerk fight-flight Mars, because that's a return to the past. We have to know our boundaries, but we have to stand firm in them. So we want to encourage people, men in particular, to step into their positive Mars again, because part of the deep state plan in the last 50 plus years has been to suppress the martial quality.
Yeah, I love that. And what you're saying is like being in integrity, almost like being the protector, almost like the father archetype as
Yes.
well, of going, no, this is not okay, and I will not have this, and using that to create goods,
Yeah.
and using that not in essence of anger, making yourself unwell, making yourself sick, being so angry, it ends up being destructive and out of control, and you're reactive and not creative. So you're talking around reclaiming that anger as power and channeling it in the right way, which is beautiful.
And with everything we do look, this planet is about the experience of polarity consciousness. And we have to recognize that that is the reality in our, if we call it 3D level. And so it is the dance between Mars and Venus. It is the dance between, if you like, Jupiter, Saturn. These are different archetypes to explain this reality. Now, those archetypes may not be useful to some people. They want to use a different languaging. That's fine. But like, for example, Jupiter always says yes and Saturn always says no. We need a balance, because if mass murderer bangs on your door in the middle of the night and says, "Can I come in?" you need a healthy Saturn to say no. We can't be saying yes to everything, but we also can't be saying no to everything. It's like Mars, the archetype of Mars, in extremis, basically uses his bows, his guns, his arrows to destroy everything. But in balance, it is using the system, the defensive system, to attack, to protect when standards are needing to be protected. And it's connected to universal law, which is truth, authenticity, family. There's been an assault on the family for over 100 years, and it's gone exponential in the last 20, 30 years. And we're all suffering the fallout of that, all of us. And we have to somehow rebuild that, because it's part of the biological story of the divine human, as opposed to the transhuman vector, which is genetic, which is basically the push towards technocracy and a push towards humans becoming machines. And this is the great debate that we're in our era, when you really go up to 50,000 feet to look down. Do we choose God, source, creator, and our connection to that divine source as biological human beings on the one hand, or do we succumb and invite in the technological, the technocratic, and the homo bull genetic, which is basically transhumanism?
And it looks like, George, it's coming whether we like it or not. It looks like that's the...
It does seem that way to a large extent. It's so interesting the way I'm living my life. I really do my very best to not, because I know the real water, the real structured water, the real artesian ancient water, when there's plenty of it deep down in these ancient wells. There's more of it, according to certain studies now, than the oceans. The earth is vast underneath, and we're already not only learning about Tartaria, but different civilizations beneath the earth. I mean, this is real. And I think once we can rediscover quickly the beauty and the bountifulness of Mother Earth, Mother Nature, and the water and good food, growing crops, we can pull back very quickly against fake food. But it's hard, and especially in Britain where you live. Now, I know I sound British, but I live in the United States, and it's horrendous here too, with big pharmaceuticals and big agricultural. But it's breaking down. We already have an administration, no matter how chaotic it is seeming. We have an administration that has expressed to make America healthy again, that has expressed to make the world healthy again. Pushback, huge. Yes. And part of that pushback isn't just big pharma. It's also the mind control of an element of we, the people who are enslaved in the matrix system, don't trust that they will accept what mainstream media tells them, that this is bogus, that this is nonsense. Do you see what I'm saying? So part of this awakening is us really coming to terms with the truth of who we are. And we have been brainwashed beyond through an indoctrination system that's called an education system. It goes all the way back to the Rockefellers of the 1920s. I mean, I could talk for hours on that. I mean, it's intense, but we are basically in an era of deprogramming ourselves. It's what you and I are here to do. And, you and I have different specialities, and you are deprogramming, helping men hugely step into their sovereign beautiful power of being responsible, of leading, and yet having that polarity balance. The woman leads in a different way through emotions, through connection, and that then reinforces the male archetype because he's protected emotionally, you see.
Yeah, I love that. The balance of the feminine and the masculine, and you need that nurture as a masculine from somewhere, and you also need to repair that mother's wound. And we have to do that through relationship. And I think we were discussing this. People get confused what healing is and why you would go to someone. And it really is that energy. It's that pure love. It's what you can't see in the field that really connects us and heals and creates something that is unexplainable, which AI could never replicate.
To add to that, I would also say, and I'm obviously being reductive in saying that, but the feminine energy writ large, the symbolic element of feminine yin energy is invisible. It is supportive. And I think, and again, you're born in this life in a female body. I'm in this life born in a male body. But we both have those archetypes as our being. You have Mars somewhere in your chart. I have Venus somewhere. And so it
Of
goes on.
course.
And so at the end of the day, that invisibility is just as potent as the visible. And actually, when we move it into the spiritual realm, and we're learning through quantum physics now, which is really catching up with the sacred mystical act of spirituality. And of course, the Himalayan Tibetans and the Peruvian shamans have always known this. And science is slowly, thank goodness, catching up. There is this balance between what is active and external and what is internal and inactive, but active in a hidden sense. And that's part of what, I mean, I speak for myself. I'm fully learning how the divine mystery is truthfully there constantly, as well as the actual action in the 3D.
And that's beautiful. And that's a connection. As what you're saying is we all possess feminine and masculine within us. We all possess the being, which is the, connection, the receiving, the doing, which is the action, the masculine, the going. We all have that within us, and it's balancing that so then we then can go out into the world authentically, which is so beautiful. So tell us about your journey around, we were talking around love and relationships, we're talking about the agenda to break down the traditional family system. So tell us about your story with this. I know we've both gone through divorces. And so what's your outtake on that, your perspective on that, and your story around that?
I mean, some of this is really quite personal, but I have to share it and hopefully do it in a kind, beautiful way. That I am definitely a product of not being able to have any influence on my children. And that's very complicated. But I was divorced 4 or 5 years ago. I was married to a very strong personality. She's very controlling, and that's her archetype. But because of my views on the vaccines, and that's why we got divorced, because of my views on really everything to do with what I see as the future Earth, and her archetype is protection and preservation of the old, neither the twain shall meet. And so that's not a judgment. That's actually a very good explanation of the polarity consciousness not being able to find the middle ground. And I was unable to. I had to leave. But the children have chosen, because they've grown up in New York City with their mother, they've had to live. That's their reality. So it's been my biggest challenge has been, how can I have any influence on them? And they're fully aware why I got divorced, why I left, but their world hasn't particularly changed yet. And it's taught me vast patience. There's no question. I mean, I've never spoken about this before, but vast amounts of grief, because the inability thus yet to be able to have any meaningful connection. I mean, my daughter hasn't spoken to me at all since the election. It was getting a little bit better just before the election. We were starting to see each other a little bit. But the moment that election happened, I've been totally cut off. So I've been blamed for that. And I don't blame her for that, but that's a very intense place to be. But to bring it to the collective, we all have our versions of that story. Now, that story is unique, but it's wholly universal. And we all have different, whether it's with a friend, a lover, a partner, a parent, there has been such a schism. And of course, it's been done very deliberately. And one of my areas of expertise is understanding the deep state. I'm an avid amateur historian, and I've been at it for years. And again, I've been following people like David Icke for well over a decade. And I've learnt a lot. I've been at the university, the invisible university, maybe getting many PhDs. And of course, I don't have a PhD, meaning I've really started to study the real his story, her story, and understand, for example, the economic magic that has been executed so brilliantly through the Federal Reserve. And of course, that goes back to the sinking of the Titanic. And that goes back to, of course, the United States being broke after the Civil War and turning to the Rothschilds Bank of Europe. Yes, you see, humans have got to, it's not that everyone can become an avid historian, but it's helpful because then we really start to peel the onion in a way where we get closer to truth. I mean, Mike King is one of these historians I absolutely find fascinating. He's published many books, self-published, of course, because publishing houses won't have it. But he's really exploring the real history. And that's part of the Pluto and Aquarius conversation. And as you know, I'm an astrologer. Pluto transformation, Aquarius beliefs. We are going through a radical shift in not just our own belief systems, but actually in who we are, our ontology, our epistemology. What is the human species? What has been kept hidden from us? What has been the secret space programs since the 40s and before? And hidden 0 point energy, Tesla, real Tesla energy, not fake electric cars nonsense. No, we're talking 0 point energy, time travel project, Looking Glass. These conversations have to be had with Joe Schmo, with Tommy down at the pub, to an extent for us, because it's about us collectively stepping into higher realms of consciousness. No longer can it be the elites who then fake it and invert it and control everyone, or the mystic just on the mountain. Tommy's got to step up here because we as a human species we're in time now. It's our time.
Yes. And it's kind of like, again, the power to the people, right? And, coming back to that and then coming back to your story around your relationship and the grief you go through from the loss of a relationship and not being able to connect with people you love is the biggest grief that
Huge.
you would ever go through. And yet it's not discussed, and it's not, as I've been through a very similar journey to you, exactly at the same time, or 5 years ago, just before lockdown. And to go through these stages of grief, of just wanting to love, but the love's not getting anywhere, right? And then you saying, like, because of your principles around the election, and that was because you're very pro-Trump, aren't you?
I look at it slightly differently, and thank you
Yeah,
for asking me that.
yeah,
I am very pro the destruction of the old system.
yes.
I know very well that Donald Trump has a Uranus conjunct the North Node conjunct the Sun. Quickly, let me explain what that means. Uranus is
Hmm.
innovation, destruction of the old. It's the
Yep.
opposite to Saturn. And North
Yep.
Node, life purpose, soul contract, Sun, visibility. That man was chosen by the military to come in and destroy the old system. Yes, it's the art of war. Yes, it's Sun Tzu. Yes, there's smoke and mirrors. Does stuff make sense to any of us? Of course it doesn't. For all of us, we can pretend that we're so knowledgeable. Human beings don't fully understand it because it's playing out like the Elon Musk and Donald Trump spat. I have my views on it because of the release of Epstein files, and everyone's got different views. I don't ever sit here and say I have the final say. Of course not. I'm a human being. We are all in the dark. But I'm fully aware of that archetypal principle. I have supported the archetype of Trump from the beginning because he wasn't a rhino, meaning he wasn't a true Republican and he wasn't a Democrat. He was destroying the old system that kept us enslaved. And many people can't have that. I had many people, including the ex-wife, saying, George, why can't you just be a normal Republican? And I said, precisely for that reason. I will support someone who is going to, and then leading up to the election, of course, that's what it was all about. Have there been certain situations since the election which have got many of us very confused? Absolutely. But for me, I go deep into myself and I feel there's a longer plan here to reveal the corruption. And in order to expose the corruption, we sometimes have to appoint people close to ourselves to get the public to wake up. The Elon Musk thing for me is one big game of
Mm.
exposure.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean I have to like or dislike him. I happen to personally have faith and an inner knowing that the true archetype of Trump, and I know there are two or three body doubles and clones, as there were four of Biden, and there are three or four of Musk. I'm fully aware of the technology. The essence of the real Trump yes, I am a fan of, to answer your question, because it's about we the people. And it's about the new Atlantis and this birthing of the Second Republic. Absolutely.
So how does the clones, like having different clones of these people, affect the other individuals? How
Well,
does that?
it makes it very confusing. So this is
Yeah.
my surmise. I don't ever look at any of you and the people who will listen to this saying, I know this for fact. But my deep sense is, firstly, the clone technology has existed since the Second World War. That's truthful. We are 100% years behind, we human beings, 100% behind our understanding of what technology is capable of. And that's well documented now. So clones, I mean, let's take the Biden clone. This was probably the most famous one because most people now look at the photographs and realize, I mean, certainly most people I come across, oh no, they were definitely two. One was 5'7", one was 5'11". One had blue eyes, one had brown eyes. One wrote left-handed, signed the orders, one wrote right-handed. One had more masculine, I'm a portrait painter, so I'm very interested in faces. And one had much more testosterone in the cheekbone, you know that, as a male. The other was much more feminine. And then I saw masks come up. I saw glitches here. I mean, we've all seen, sometimes it's not even a clone. We have amazing prosthetics, the prosthetic quality. I mean, I've watched interviews with former leaders from the CIA talking about prosthetics. I mean, some of these interviews are 30 plus years now. I mean, it's phenomenal, the technology. We have to wake up to the reality of this. So to answer your question about clones, I'm going to say white hats and black hats have their own versions of them, I think. How that plays out, what the agreements are, I have no idea. But we are definitely in a Neptunian world where up is down, left is right, etc. And of course, what the media, the mainstream media tell us is total lies. We have to learn to go into our own judgment, our own sense of observation and bear witness and eventually get back to nature. And through going back to nature, we can't be manipulated in the way that we are when we're living in tower blocks. We wear rubber shoes, we drink tap water with lead and arsenic and fluoride in it. It's all this stuff of the return to the divine principle. As a result, we can pull power back to we the people, and it's going to be a process. But I have faith. Lastly, I will say, I live in America here. Even though it's deeply chaotic, deeply confusing, I have huge faith that it's working because more and more people are really waking up to the whole program matrix.
Yes, it's like definitely things are definitely starting to shift. And I suppose that starts with ourselves, right? The relationship with ourselves, really grounding in, really connecting to whatever consciousness you believe is there, listening to our intuition and not looking outside of ourselves constantly.
You're absolutely right that it has to start from within, and to base one's own reality on one's own inner world and who are we, the journey work, the inner work, and then the outer becomes a reflection of the inner, and that is a much better, a more conscious way of living a human life. And we are all, me included, learning that very deeply at this timeline.
Yes, of course, it's a forever journey, isn't it? And the more we realize, okay, what's pulling me away from connecting and giving and sharing, then we can then come back into alignment with our soul's purpose. So what do you think your soul's purpose is?
Well, it's an interesting one because I've always been an artist. I've always been quite good at painting and photography. It's been there ever since I was born. So sharing the divine light through art has always been there. But I've also always been a musician. I was a chorister at school, and I was one of these ghastly English boarding schools. But the first one, I had moments of, I would bring up all the other choristers and gong them under a large church bell in the tower. And I would get away with it, and they'd come more, more, more. And basically, I was healing them. And I didn't even know that because the frequency of the bells was such that we were all, me included, bathed in that beautiful frequency. And I want to bring that back. I think the soul contract for me is definitely frequency music. Of course, astrology. I'm an alchemist. I do astrology, tarot. I practice many different modalities, but it's all about the searching out of truth. Who are we? What are we here to do? You know, the material matrix has never vibrated with me. I've never understood it. I don't believe in usury. I don't believe in debt and keeping people enslaved in that system. I'm very anti that. And I think we need to free ourselves from that. And I have faith that the quantum financial system that is being born, it hasn't been actualized in the physical realm as of yet, but many of us are aware that we're moving closer and closer towards a quantum system, away from the SWIFT system, away from the central banking Federal Reserve system, into something newer. And of course, the dark side are going to want to see us go down a central digital currency, which is totally controlled. I would say we're going to go down towards something where it will be gold, silver backed, and it hopefully will be crypto, but we, the people, will have total control over that money. I have faith in that. It's sometimes difficult to, but I do believe it's going to happen.
That's beautiful. Yeah, shift into personal power and vibrating and doing what you love. Like you said, frequency is everything. Frequency and healing others through frequency and through just that purity is gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful. And your art is absolutely stunning. And the work you do is beautiful. Oh, yeah. Is there anything else that's in your heart that you want to share right now?
Yeah, I think, right now we're going into this quite intense square between Jupiter and Saturn. And it's going to play out off and on for the next quite a few months and not actually fully resolve itself until the middle of next year. This is the dance between expansion, new belief, Jupiter, new ideas coming in which can support us, and then moving out of the old Saturn. Saturn is in a very difficult position. Saturn, I don't want to get too technical, but Saturn doesn't like to be in Aries. So Saturn is very weak at the moment. This is a good time for us to trust our intuition and start to really challenge our own belief systems. Because when we can do that, we do free ourselves from the matrix, from the entanglement of the lower 3D. And we're able, much better equipped then, through our connection to nature and all that, to journey towards love in authenticity.
I love that. And we've talked extensively around boxes that people try and to cast people in, and whatever the boxes are, to get rid of these boxes, whether or not it's a diagnosis or people saying that they're this gender or this sexuality. It's like, get rid of the boxes and just be you and not
Right.
judge any of it.
Because I think what's so important is those boxes are actually stumbling blocks. They're not who we are. They may be a fragment of ourselves, but we aren't even our belief systems. So everything I've shared here doesn't actually tell you anything about me. My beliefs are constantly changing. And I
Yeah.
think we free ourselves from that. Sexual proclivity is very different from sort of all this gender identification, which again, I've understood communism for many years. I did study politics and philosophy at university. And, communism has, really, the National Nazi was communism. It was National Socialist Party. It was a different version of communism. And it was a different coming together of the corporate and the state. We really have to see what communism's really about, because it is about totalitarianism. It's about bringing us all down to one thing. And I think frequency plays a real part in once we understand who we are, we can stand sovereign, we can see the field in front of us, and we can make really good decisions for oneself and not be pulled into a fake story. Because people who've gone down that gender route of separation, LGBTQYXZ, and so it goes on. And of course, we're coming out of it now in America, thank goodness, is those people were very unhappy. And then they were doing awful stuff to their bodies. And, for me, it's about we're born the way we're born. That's part of the journey work, even if it is hard, where it's part of that's the experience in this incarnation.
Very interesting. Yeah, because you're saying like you're born the way that you're born. And yet there's, as a child, you're a soul, aren't you? So you come into this body and you're a soul. And so, you're going to identify with mum, then you're going to identify with dad, and then you might be a bit of a tomboy. And then, so obviously going, okay, that's just normal. And we're all just figuring it out and loving and nurturing it rather than trying to box any of it and categorize it is a more nurturing, feminine way Whereas if I think the masculine way is like, put this in a process, put this in a box, capture it and tuck it away and make it right or wrong. I mean, yeah. So you're talking around changing that narrative, and then coming from a place of love and
Yeah.
non-judgment.
No judgment. I mean, I mean, for me, it's really interesting as an artist, just as a person. I've never looked at people through that lens. I just haven't. And as what I think I'm freer because of that. I mean, I've had so many different friends and experiences with people from all over the world, and whether that's friendship, romantic, or otherwise. And I can only speak for myself. I'm actually more interested in the other rather than someone like myself. That's just me. Now, I don't even judge that against or pro someone else. It's just like the freedom experience in being able to interact through curiosity with another soul incarnate is very exciting, as opposed to the fake Saturn of, my gosh, we all, because it's a program, of course, have to be doing the same thing, whatever it is. And I think the new earth is very much about you do you, I do me, as long as we're not doing, satanic ritual and abuse of other people, then really people are in their private lives should do whatever creative projects they want to pursue. I mean, that's real freedom. And once it's at a level of consciousness, we're consciously choosing, people are going to have wonderful creative projects, and it's not going to be as dark and hidden and sinister as it once